Most couples were never taught emotional regulation, but there is hope because it's not permanent.
Healthy marriages are not built by avoiding conflict. How many times have you heard that? Well, it just is what it is. Well, does it have to be? Because we have the power to change. We're going to name it, we're going to call it what it is, and we're going to step outside of that tension, and then we're going to look into it. We're in this together. I do, and I always will.
Yeah,
And
sure.
there is no plan B. Welcome to C's for Your Marriage. We're Trisha and Thomas Walker, relationship coaches and communication experts. We help couples improve communication, resolve recurring conflict, and build healthier, stronger marriages. What are we talking about today, Trish?
Well, why do we keep having the same argument in our marriage? I know we've had the same argument, right? In our 30 years, we just celebrated our 30th anniversary.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I know we found ourselves in many situations and many arguments that seem to be repeating over and over and over again, right?
Yeah, I'd like to think that some of them no longer repeat themselves.
Yeah, I would think so. Well, this recurring conflict is a sign that there's a deeper relationship pattern that's been established. And so while the topic can often change, the tension stays the same. You might find one person is, pushing the relationship, trying to push harder and harder to resolve this conflict, while the other person might tend to shut down. But you both leave feeling frustrated, misunderstood, and emotionally exhausted. But I think many couples, they think the fight is just about money or parenting, or maybe it's an in-law issue, or maybe an intimacy issue. But it's actually something that runs deeper. It's a relationship pattern that we have to recognize, or the history just tends to repeat itself.
Yeah, I can think of one example of a recurring issue, which was the topic of homeschooling our children. You remember that? It
I
was
do.
back in Atlanta, Georgia, and Lilburn to be exact. And you felt so strongly that we had to homeschool our kids and that it was the right thing to do for the children, for the family. I just wasn't there. And so when we had these conversations about this is what we need to do, it typically ended up in a lot of frustration, misunderstanding, and disappointment. I think what finally began to change was realizing that we slowed the conversation down enough to really try to get beneath the surface and say, why do we keep having the same conflict? What's going on here? And through talking and really listening to understand one another, we began to understand that the issue wasn't about homeschooling. The real issue was how were we going to parent and raise our children and give them a foundation that would sustain them for their lifetime.
Right.
That was the real issue underneath the surface. And once we got to the heart of the matter, remember the peace kind of entered the room, the tension dropped. And I think it was in that moment we realized, wow, we actually want the same thing. We want to give our children a strong foundation. We want them to be rooted in Christ. We want them to follow Jesus. We want the same thing. We're on the same side.
Right.
Now we can partner and begin having conversations about how do we actually achieve that so that we both feel good.
Right.
And we started collaborating. We started having different communication, different conversations, and that allowed us to explore different options. And we finally found one that worked for both of us.
Right, exactly. So while I thought the solution was homeschooling, it actually ended up being a combination of things over the course of their education, but the main thing was Christian school.
Yeah,
And so that actually worked for us.
it worked for us.
Yeah.
And so the idea here is that we don't repeat arguments, we repeat patterns. Beneath the surface of these issues are usually bigger topics. They could be expectations that we might have that aren't being met. They could be wants that or desires. They could be other things that are going on underneath the surface. And what we want to be able to do through this podcast is explore that and begin to recognize that these repetitive cycles will keep pulling us back into the same experience until we actually begin to change and recognize the pattern.
With lots of couples that we've worked with over the last, I guess, 15 plus years, There's a few key things that I believe are really important that we try to emphasize with them. And one of them is your relationship is not broken. That is so important because I think many couples think a lot of times that it's them, that their relationship might be the only one that is going through this issue or whatever it is that they're going through, and it is just not fixable. But your relationship's not broken.
Yeah.
There
I
is
mean,
there is a
think
solution.
I agree. I mean, if you think about the fact that you have 2 people, actually 2 powerful people coming together from very different backgrounds and coming into this union to become one and really try to figure out how to do life together when we're still individuals. And the idea isn't to sacrifice who we are. It's to figure out how do we bring 2 people that are very different into one and create harmony, connection. Yes, there are going to be moments where it's rough. But we want to figure out how to do is make sure we go through those seasons and those challenges of life, staying connected, and that we come through stronger without hurt and disappointment and creating more tension in the relationship than we do peace.
Right, right, and of course, we're not leaving out Christ in the mix, right? Because Christ is
Yeah,
definitely the one that helps with
100%.
all of this, for sure. I think the second thing also is and I think you highlighted it right there, is just about you're on the same team, right? So it's not you versus me, it's not, I'm getting my way, or you're not I'm, doing whatever I can so you don't get your way. Whatever that is, that's not the
Right.
case. We're on the same team, and we're rowing in the same boat. I think
Yeah.
that is key.
And ideally in the same direction.
Yeah. We're not fighting against each other.
Yeah, one of the things I'm just reminded of that I really love about you is, I mean, even yes, after 30 years and being relationship coaches and communication experts, we still have our moments.
Mhm,
And sometimes when tensions start rising, you just look at me and you'll say, "Babe, I'm for you."
mhm.
And it just kind of lowers the temperature level.
Right.
Just be reminded that I'm on your side. I'm
Mhm.
with you. I'm not against you. So why don't we make sure that we get back on the same side or and figure out what is coming against us, right? What's coming against us that we need to unify and join ourselves against.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say the third thing also that we really emphasize is that it's really important that we focus on how we're individually showing up in the relationship, right? It's not about
Well,
fixing
you
our
need to.
yeah, fixing
You
our
need to.
partner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fixing our partner, telling our partner about themselves, what like, all of those things, right? It's about looking inside of, like, myself and determining how can I best show up in the relationship, and when my partner does the same thing, then that's where you talk about those 2 powerful people that are aligned with Christ, that it can actually move powerfully together in their relationship,
And it works.
and it works.
And I also think the idea of not blaming and shaming one another.
For sure.
We make mistakes, and I think we had to learn this over the years is we don't wanna hold those things over each other's head. Just as much as Jesus forgave us unconditionally, we wanna also be in that place that we can do the same for our spouse.
Right, yeah, for sure. It just reminds me of don't do those 3 a.m., uh, arguments. We've had those before. It's like you tell me something and then 3 a.m. I'm waking you up. Well, this doesn't happen anymore. I
Well,
would
we've learned the technique, right?
we learned a technique, yeah. But I would wake you up at 3 a.m. and be like, "I can't believe you said this." Da, 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 da." No, that doesn't really work because it's like if you're gonna share with me and you're gonna be vulnerable with me, then I can't throw it back in your face.
100%. I'm just remembering the technique because early in our marriage, it was like we could not go to sleep if we were disappointed or angry with each other. So there were all-nighters, right?
Mhm.
Where we would just be working through an issue. Through the years, we learned this technique of, well, what if we went to sleep and talked about this in the morning? And are you okay with that? Yes, I'm okay with that. So we can still stay connected. We can get a good night's sleep and we can both know that we're going to get up in the morning and confidently address whatever issue it is that we need to face.
Right, right, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one of the last things also is that we teach couples that, you know what? We're not normally taught how to be a good communicator, especially in relationships. right? In intimate relationships, we're not taught that
Yeah.
typically. Or what we are taught are unhealthy habits or unhealthy ways of relating to one another. And so it's learning that you can be a good communicator. It's just learning those techniques and tools on how to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't do conflict very well. It wasn't really modeled to me when I grew up. And so when things would get heated between us, I would withdraw. But I've had to learn over the years that to you, that's a signal of me leaving. And one of the things that you look for is, hey, let's stay in the conversation. So we've had to learn how to put down certain tools and pick up other tools along the way so that we have a healthy tool belt.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so these reoccurring conflicts that we're talking about, they're not random. Like I said, they are a deeper dynamic underneath the surface that shapes how we as couples respond to stress, tension, disconnection. So once we begin to recognize what this is and what's happening beneath the surface, then conversations can start to change.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've been studying over the years is what are the dynamics in a relationship? And we've identified four forces, if you will, that really play into how relationships come together and how they move forward. The first one is connection. Emotional connection is really important. It is the level of intimacy that we have. How relatable are we? Do we enjoy each other's company? And are we connected physically, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, right? And then the second thing is commitment. Commitment is so important, especially what in our experience for women, the safety and the security of knowing we're in this together and you're not going to leave me is so critical. And so that commitment and dedication to the relationship, which is I do, I do, and I always will.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
there is no plan B. I'm in this until, sad to say, death do us part.
Right, yeah. The commitment piece really helps you get through some of those challenging seasons that, every marriage has.
Yeah, 100%. And then there's tension, right?
Right.
Things do get stressful. Anxiety might creep in, fear, anger. And so when tension happens, how do we work through unresolved conflict? And then the last one is communication. And it's how do we navigate those difficult seasons if and when we're not connected, if we're feeling like commitment is wavering or there's high stress moments. Communication is really what we found to be the pillar that allows you to work through any of those other three dynamics. So those four dynamics are not individual and in isolation. They're always interrelated and at play with each other, right? If I'm feeling like I might not be as connected, I might start questioning commitment. Stress comes. I'm not that great of a communicator. And boom, things might go south very quickly. The dynamics and how these things show up create the patterns, right? How connected are we? How well do we communicate? How do we deal with stress? And how committed are we? These things are always at play. And depending on how they're playing with one another, is the patterns that emerge in a relationship.
Yeah. And so there are a few common patterns that we often see in relationships, and we're just gonna mention just a few of them. The first one is actually it's called caring but stuck. And so this is when we actually really love each other deeply, we're committed, we generally want things to be well in our relationship, to get better if things are tough, but these conversations just keep circling without any resolution. And so it's these small little, I guess, conflicts can actually turn into bigger conflicts or familiar, arguments that just leave both of us feeling frustrated and misunderstood.
The idea that just came to our mind about that is we love each other so much and we care about each other so much. And then you can think about, and we've heard couples share this with us is, well, what were we arguing about? And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't even know. It just happened, right? Things just escalated very quickly. But the caring, again, that caring is there in the
Right,
relationship.
absolutely. Yeah, many couples in this pattern are trying harder and harder to fix the relationship, to make things work, while unintentionally repeating the same emotional responses that keep this conflict going. So there's still care, there's still commitment present, but like we said, the tension just keeps overpowering healthy communication. I would say that oftentimes, maybe couples that are in their first years of marriage, maybe even the first 10 years of marriage, might find themselves in this particular type of pattern where there's tension that rises, maybe due to learning how to manage all the different tensions in life and managing a relationship and managing a young family and all those things that we're learning, when when we're first married. And it kind of sometimes that tension can overpower just our communication and being able to make things work, and so we end up in this unhealthy pattern.
Yeah, I think that's really good, and I just wanna come back to emphasize something that you said so it doesn't get lost, is the idea of caring but stuck really is the caring is there, the commitment's there, but there's some level of tension and some area of communication that are creating opportunity, so we're stuck, right? Because the tensions of life are in the way, and the tools that we're using to communicate aren't helping us navigate that in a way to move forward.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this could even be, I know we mentioned it earlier, just even just lack of boundaries, not having proper boundaries in our life. So if one person is a yes person, and anytime people ask things of them, they don't know how to say no, and it's always a yes, that might actually really frustrate the other person, especially especially if they're wanting some, quality time or what have you. So lack of boundaries definitely can cause tension in a relationship,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Yeah. So this can make both people feel exhausted,
Yeah.
like they're caring too much, or one person is caring too much, and like you said, feeling stuck in that same cycle. The next one is stable but distant. And so this is, from the outside, everything may appear great. It may appear like we're functioning well, we're together day to day, we're handling the responsibilities, we're keeping everything moving forward, but emotionally, we're distant. The relationship can slowly begin feeling more like a routine than a connection.
Yeah, this is, I mean, we've had this over the course of our marriage and couples, and it's everything on the surface just looked like it was going great. And then all of a sudden, it's not. And it's, what happened to that? What happened to the Millers, or what happened to the Joneses? And by the way, I'm just making these names up for
Yeah.
examples. Um, but
Mhm.
the idea is that it looks stable, but it's distant, and we're not as connected as we A, want to be, and B, probably need to be for the relationship to thrive.
Yeah. I think an example is maybe when a couple is together for even 15 plus years, and over time their focus became more about the kids than about themselves, about the relationship. And so they learned to make everything work. They learned how to, I guess, function as a team, right? Team in their relationship, a team as a family, whatever that is, but they lost some sort of emotional connection there.
Yeah, the emotional connection, in the program that we coach couples through, there's this idea of small talk and shop talk, right? And small talk is the little things that we do to just stay connected throughout the day. They're very low pressure, but it's just about what's going on in your life, what's going on in my life, and so it's just really very small, and we need that. We need that to nurture our connection. And then there's this idea of shop talk, which is, right, honey, I'm gonna get the kids and you get the clothes from the cleaners, and I'll gas up the car and I'll meet you at dinner, and then we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do that. And when we're raising kids, it can turn into shop talk all of the time. And the more and more there's shop talk and less small talk is an opportunity for distance to enter into the relationship.
Right.
And so that's why we talk about the importance of date nights and little moments. It doesn't have to be about going out and doing extravagant things, but how do we stay connected, right? We'd have nights where we cook together and things of that nature, where it's just being intentional about making sure that the distance doesn't get wide, and that we fuel or that we flame that connection.
Right, absolutely. So when that happens over time, stress, unresolved tension, emotional exhaustion, or simply the pace of life, like you were talking about, can quietly reduce intimacy and meaningful communication. So, and like you said, these conversations can become more functional than relational, and it may start to feel like you're living alongside each other than deeply with each other.
Yeah, we're roomies.
We're roomies. We're high-fiving,
Yeah.
on the way out the door and
Yeah.
the way in the door, right?
Yeah, but again, the idea is to recognize the pattern, and then as we
Exactly.
get a little bit further in the podcast, we're gonna start giving some suggestions on how we can identify, but also begin to move through, the
Exactly.
pattern and get things back maybe where we want them to be.
Yeah. I think we've been through probably every pattern that there is. Maybe that's
Well,
why.
that's why we can talk about them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, now let's talk about the next pattern, trying without tools. We were trying so hard, and we've worked with so many couples. They care, they love each other deeply, but they are trying and they just do not have the tools for effective communication. And this idea of trying without tools is you want that healthy relationship, but when tensions rise, it's really difficult to do anything differently. And conversations escalate quickly, people shut down emotionally, and it's just like feeling like you're going around and around and around the mountain. And I remember, that's not fun, right? Is like deja vu. I've been here before and I know exactly how this story ends. And couples in this pattern are not lacking love, and they're definitely not lacking effort. They were never taught practical communication skills like emotional regulation, how to de-escalate a heated conversation, how to stay connected, even when it doesn't feel good or it's a challenging time, or how do you actually repair hurt or wounds that have been um, given to one another. So instead of signaling failure, this is not about failure. This is about patterns that reveal themselves and how we can develop healthier tools and new ways of responding to each other to change the conversation and to change the trajectory of our relationship.
Yeah, I guys remember so many conversations that turned into very, like, emotional outbursts, especially on my side.
Yeah.
And it's that fight or flight part of our brain that gets triggered, and I didn't know how to do anything else. I just would get defensive or, get into a place where I was just emotional and would cry or get angry and then start lashing out. And so once I started learning how to use different techniques and different tools to help me when communicating and how to even regulate my own emotions through the conversation, it really helped me to have, better outcomes in our conversations.
Yeah, you just use a word I want to bring back up, which is triggered. And I think that's also a part of this idea of patterns is patterns repeat themselves when triggers continually get pushed on, if you will. And sometimes those triggers are internal and sometimes those triggers are external. For example, someone rolls their eyes repeatedly. Well, that could be a trigger for their partner to go off, right? See, there you are. There you did it again. You just rolled your eyes again. That triggered me, and now I'm going down, the path of,
Mhm.
let's just say, destruction, right? And I think that recognizing those triggers and beginning to ask, what is it that gets me when I start feeling the tension rise inside of me? That is an opportunity to get your emotion in check, right? Because our emotions are not meant to control us. We are meant to control our emotions. But if we're not in touch with our emotions and we're not sure what's triggering those emotions, and we don't have tools to deal with them in the moment, then that's like a really, really potentially toxic situation.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of times we might find ourselves even repeating some of the same things that maybe we even saw our parents do. We start saying some of the same things to our spouse that maybe
Yeah.
our mother said to our father or vice versa, right? Because that's what was built into us. That's what we know, and we don't know how to do anything else.
Yeah.
We just resort to what we know.
But there's good news, Trisha.
And what's that?
These are patterns that are labeled, but they are not permanent identities,
Yeah, for sure.
right? They're signals and they reflect what may be happening in the relationship right now. But they can change. That's the beautiful thing about us as human beings and with Christ and Holy Spirit is we have the ability through his power to change. It takes awareness, it takes some intentionality, and it also takes healthier tools to begin to make changes that we want to make.
Self-awareness is, I would say, one of the key things that actually helped me to learn how to relate to you in a better way, is becoming self-aware enough about what's going on inside of me so then I can communicate that to you, and allowed me to also learn how to really, like, separate what was happening inside of me and some of the thoughts that were inside of me, separate that from, like, just being present in the moment to truly try to listen to you and your heart.
Now we've covered 3 of the relationship patterns. By the way, there are 8 that we've identified. If you go to trishaandthomas.com, you can read all about all 8 of them because they are very different and the solution or the underlying issue that needs to be addressed will vary. And then the second thing I want to say is we've created the relationship patterns assessment. So if you would like to take that, it's free and it's available to you also at trishaandthomas.com. Because hearing about the patterns is one thing, right? Now that we're aware, the next thing is how do we recognize them in our own relationship? That's the goal. That's what
Right.
we want to be able to pass on to our listeners is patterns show up in the conversations that we keep repeating. So if you find yourself having the same conversations over and over again, the topic might change, but it's the same conversation. I said this, they do that, we end up here. I said this, they said that, we end up here. There is a pattern going on. That sounds like it should be a song.
There's a pattern going on.
Pattern going.
There's a pattern going on.
And what it means underneath the surface is usually there's a misunderstanding, there's a conflict, or there's an misaligned expectation that's going on. I expected something, I'm not getting it. I'm frustrated. There's a conflict. Some decision that we made, I may not have been completely in agreement, and so I'm still holding that. So there's a lot of things going on underneath the surface, but what's happening above is the pattern. Okay. There are sometimes simple conversations, simple questions we can ask ourselves. I think one of the things here, as we get into this section, one thing that you always talk about that has helped, and it's helped couples as well that we coach, slow down and get that self-awareness. Ask yourself, what conflict keeps resurfacing in our relationship? You can do that by yourself. You can even do it as a couple. If things are tense and heated, it may not be the best time to try to get philosophical, but it could be a way to break the cycle and ask a question where the answer isn't immediately available. You have to work on it together. That's a good question. Why does this conflict resurface? Well, let me tell you what I think. And again, we want to have the right tools for those answers because we don't want to continue to repeat the pattern.
Yeah.
Or what happens between us when life gets hard? That's a really important question. Because life will get hard, how do we navigate those circumstances? Be aware of that. Be conscious of the things that begin to emerge whenever life gets hard. And how do we recover after tense moments? Right? What are the things that we can do to make sure that we are getting as quickly reconnected as possible if and when disconnection arises? Another way to identify patterns, I've already mentioned it, is to take the relationship patterns assessment. It's free. And one more plug, trishaandthomas.com. And you can find out today. One thing I want to say, Trish, before we move forward is these assessments that we've created and have made available to you are really to help you assess where you might be in your relationship right now. It is not about assigning blame. It is not a clinical diagnosis,
Right.
and it is not judgment. It literally is an assessment to say, this is how I'm experiencing the relationship right now. And the reality is, one spouse could take it, another spouse could take it, and they could get completely different results. And you know what? That's a beautiful thing because it means that we're experiencing the relationship differently. And now we have a tool that we can use to come together and talk about that in a really healthy and productive way.
Yeah, absolutely. I just remember years ago, we were kind of in this reoccurring conflict. And I think I stopped and I said, how is it that we keep going around the same mountain over and over and over again? And I said, I want a new mountain. So, how can we get to a new mountain? And I think just by asking that question helped us to start to brainstorm together what was going on and how to overcome the same
Yeah.
the same challenge and get something, move on and get a different challenge.
And there's something important there is that you said, I want a new mountain. You didn't attack me. You didn't say, you're the reason why we keep going around this mountain. You said, how come we keep going around the mountain? And you said, I want a new mountain. And it opened up an opportunity for me to say, you know what? I want a new mountain too. I'm tired of this mountain. Let's tear this mountain down.
Yeah.
Like we're so it put us into a perspective to say this thing that we keep battling, we're gonna overcome it. And another challenge might come. In fact, I think we're kind of asking for one by saying we want a new mountain. But the whole point is that you didn't attack me in that moment. You stood outside of the conversation and you asked a really important question. And then you said you shared a new want with me. Like, I want a new mountain. I'm tired of going around this one. And it gave me the opportunity to say, I'm right here with you. I'm tired too. So let's figure it out.
Absolutely. So I think there's some key things here that I believe that we can all take away from this. And it really helps with focusing on not the conflict itself, right? But to really pause and ask ourselves some four key questions. The first question is, what is happening emotionally between us right now? Again, back to that self awareness. So, what is happening between us emotionally? But what is happening inside of me personally? What emotions am I personally experiencing right now? Getting like tuning into ourselves and identifying our emotions and how we're feeling, whether it's sad or angry or frustrated or whatever that emotion is,
Yeah.
like identifying that emotion is really helpful in that conflict.
Yeah, I mean, we coach couples to really name the emotion and we teach couples what emotions actually are because a lot of times emotions, um, we're taught to say, I feel, I feel, I feel. And usually what comes after the feeling is a thought. And so what we want to do is also tease out the thoughts and trap those. But we really want to get to the emotions because emotions do typically drive our behavior. And we coach our couples to say, it's okay to say, I'm angry.
Yeah.
We can get angry.
Yeah. So an example would be like, I feel like you don't help me with the kids, right?
Yeah,
That's not a feeling, that's
that's
a
not
thought.
feeling.
But I think that you're not helping me with the kids, and that makes me angry,
Right.
right? Those are two that's a thought that really is leading to this emotion of anger.
Well, and the other thing that we coach our couples around and that we've learned is being angry. There's a difference between being angry at the situation and then being angry at the person. And a lot of times we're taught that if there's a negative emotion, a negative anger or disappointment or frustration, that it's at you.
Right.
It's at you. Like, I'm angry at you. Well, I'm not angry at you. I'm angry because I don't have help with the kids and I'm asking for help. Right. So I think that that's really important. And that's another way to really get, I think, a level of self awareness and also the ability to hear the other person's heart and say, just because you're angry doesn't mean you're mad at me. Because what that tends to do is put the person on the defensive.
Right.
Oh, they're mad at me, so now I'm gonna get mad back at them, and I'm gonna let them, like, and so it just creates this conflict, which is, we're not meant to be in conflict. We're meant to work through challenges together.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Which is my second point of something that we can ask ourselves. Are we moving toward each other or are we moving away from each other?
And I think what we would encourage is be honest in the moment. If I'm not feeling connected right now, I've gotta communicate that to you. We can talk about what it's gonna take to get reconnected, but if I don't tell the truth and say, "Oh, honey, we're so close," but really I'm feeling distant, I'm really doing a disservice to the relationship.
Right. Yeah. And how we respond to each other, how we honor each other or lack of honor towards each other, or maybe respect is another word, whether there's respect or not respect, right? All of these things, the nonverbal communication, all of those things play a part in
Yeah.
whether there's a wall up in the other person. I'm communicating in a way where I'm blaming you a lot, or I'm, like verbally aggressive at you in different ways, and that's gonna put a wall up. And so, no, we're not gonna be close. We're going to be distant when there's a wall up in the
Yeah.
relationship. So a third question that we can ask is the tension overpowering our communication?
I think that's a really good one because it basically says, do we have the skills and the ability to recognize that that my blood pressure might be rising and there might be a level of disagreement or discomfort in the relationship. My emotions are stirred up, and I'm now letting those emotions control the way that I talk to you, as opposed to saying, this is the tension. We're going to name it. We're going to call it what it is. And we're going to step outside of that tension. And then we're going to look into it. We're going to
Right.
look down on it, right? From a heavenly perspective,
Mhm.
from a godly perspective, from a Holy Spirit, from wisdom, from discernment, from knowledge and understanding.
Mhm.
And we're not going to let that thing control us because we are way more powerful than any tension that we might face.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I think, the tension can also just be circumstances in our life, or it can be maybe it's an in-law situation like I mentioned earlier. I just remember early in our marriage, there was an issue with your mom, and
Don't you talk about my mama.
I loved
You
I
know,
loved your mom. I loved your mom. But there was there was a situation, and she and I were not getting along. There was tension there, and it was affecting our
I
marriage.
had to sit y'all both down.
You did sit us down. But you did tell your mom. What did you tell your mom?
Well, I told her that, um, that I wasn't gonna let her come between us.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, that, it says a man should leave his house and cleave to his wife, right? Leave and
Mm,
cleave. And what God put together, no one can separate, and that means no one, and that means my mom. I had to make that clear that, I was establishing my family, my marriage with you, and that was my number one priority, and it settled it.
yeah. Yeah. So it definitely that tension left, and we were able to have peace in our relationship. I think the fourth question we can ask ourselves, is are we reacting to the issue or to what the issue represents underneath?
Well, the whole thing there, the key word in that question to me is reacting. Um, Reacting typically means we're whatever our actions are or our behaviors, our words are usually coming from the lowest part of the brain. right? I'm reacting, which means I'm in fight or flight.
Yeah.
I'm letting my emotions control me. And what we want to do is get to a place where we can reflect and we can really take things in and we can consider things, we can contemplate, we can even spend time with Holy Spirit in a quiet place. I think those are the kinds of things. So if the answer is I'm reacting and I don't even know what I said, you know how sometimes, well, what did you say? Well, I didn't say that. Well, no, you said that. Well, yeah, you did say that.
Yeah.
And then you try to clean it up. Well, I said if. I said if then. Well, no, you still said it. So it's like one thing. That's a reaction, right? So sometimes we don't remember what we said in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
That is a really good indicator. I reacted to the issue.
Yeah, yeah. So we really try to encourage people when we coach them just how to recognize those things in us that when we are reacting, because sometimes, like you said, we catch ourselves. Even sometimes 30 minutes later, we were like, oh, wow, that started 30 minutes ago. And now we're down this pathway that we don't want to be on. Right. But how can we recognize that before we get down that low road
Yeah,
pathway
yeah, exactly.
and get out of that low road into more healthy conversations and being able to resolve some conflict.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just as simple as calling a timeout,
Yeah.
and just saying timeout. I also think that, we've had conversations and we encourage couples to also create declarations and create the sort of boundaries for each other. And how are we going to do life and how are we going to treat each other? You talked about honor, respect, love, encouragement, right? These are the things that we've cultivated in our marriage so that even when things get heated, we've kind of our operating system has places that we just know we don't go.
It doesn't mean we've never been there, but we've learned over the
Yeah, we
years.
don't go there anymore.
Yeah. We've learned over the years, and we're still learning. We're still learning,
It's a
right?
long journey.
It's a lifelong journey. So these pattern recognitions often begin when couples stop looking only at the argument and start paying attention to the dynamic underneath it. So these patterns can feel automatic, but there is hope because it's not permanent. So we do want to say there's hope for your marriage. There is hope for your marriage. And most couples were never taught emotional regulation, healthy conflict resolution, de escalation, how to repair conversations, or how to stay emotionally connected during tension. But healthy communication is a skill, like we said before, that can be learned and strengthened over time.
And I have exhibit A right here of someone that can learn. Remember your listening skills,
Oh, yeah.
just to talk about those.
Yeah.
Like they weren't very good very early.
Yeah. They were not good at all.
But you worked at it and you put in the work and you got better and you've been able to like continue to get better. I think the other thing though is grace
Yeah.
in the relationship, because when we deal with patterns, we're usually talking about habits. And once we recognize the habit, we are at choice. We can either try to change it or we can say, well, it just is what it is, right? How many times have you heard that? Well, it just is what it is. Well, does it have to be? Because we have the power to change and choose a different path if we want to. And so when we declare that we're going to choose a different path, I think what's really important is that the partner gives grace. Because when I'm learning a new skill or I'm trying to change my behavior, I might revert back to the way that I used to be. It could happen,
Yeah.
right? As we go through, because habits are, as we know, hard to break, and new habits, it takes a while to develop them. And so we want to make sure that we're encouraging, that we're supporting, and that we're there to love as we imagine if you had tried to listen and you didn't listen well. Imagine if I see, there you go again. See, you can't listen. What am I sowing into your spirit by telling you what you can't do?
Right.
Right? What if I just say, honey, I know you're really trying to listen right now, Let me just say it again, and you can just try to play it back one more time.
Mhm.
Why not be there? Why not be in the place where we're working together and again, we're on the same team?
Right. Absolutely.
So teammates help each other be successful. This is episode 1 of a mini episode series. And what we're going to be doing is really digging into healthy communication. We're going to dig into these relationship patterns more deeply, and we're going to help and give practical tools, wisdom, and things that you can do that you can begin activating right now in your relationship. So you'll definitely want to make sure that you save this podcast for the new episodes because we're going to take you on a journey. We always say if there's commitment, if there's care and connection, and if there's tension that can be managed, we can bring the communication skills to create thriving marriages that impact generations.
Absolutely.
It would be our hope that you do not have an argument. However, if you do find yourself in a conflict or heated conversation, pay attention to your emotions. What happens? Pay attention to how you respond to each other. Take little notes. When you hear those trigger words and you were just ready for that zinger that you could come back with, or were you able to catch it and just maybe not do it this time? What patterns keep repeating between you? Because healthy marriages are not built by avoiding conflict. That's not the goal. There is conflict, and we will experience conflict in our relationships. But they're built, strong marriages and strong relationships are built by learning how to move through that conflict while staying connected. So while patterns may feel automatic, they are not permanent. Awareness is usually the first step to beginning to make connection, healing, and lasting change. So thank you for joining Seeds for Your Marriage with Trisha and Thomas, and we'll see you on the next episode.